Good morning again on Wednesday, February 19th, 2025 here in House Transportation. We are going to be talking about Downtown Transportation Fund and a lot of the great projects and pieces that they're up to and what the planning and agenda for the project. Anyway, I will not steal any of that thunder, but I guess Natalie, you're starting. So welcome to the committee, identify and walk us through, please.
Thank you.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry. I didn't miss that. Did you have guests you wanted to introduce before we get started?
No, we should introduce, we have a
Yes.
V-Trans intern who's with us regularly, I believe. Griffin. You'll have to say last name.
Just call you Griff.
Griffin?
Although it seems like it's a common name in this room. Yeah.
And working for Andrew, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Great. Welcome.
So, welcome.
Yeah, well. Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Would it be okay if I ask you to close the door?
Oh, yeah.
Your first assignment.
Yeah, there you go.
Great. Thank you very much. I guess now I'll pass it along. Thank you for keeping me on track.
Thank you. So thank you for having us. I am Natalie Elvidge. I'm a planning coordinator with the Department of Housing and Community Development.
And my name is Gary Holloway. I'm a downtown program manager at the Department of Housing and Community Development.
And I will take the lead today and walk us through. I've got about 19 slides, and I'm aiming to give a bit of an overview of the Downtown Transportation Fund, a snapshot of what we've been seeing as common uses of the funding, some eligibility information. We also did just receive 2025 applications, so are able to give a bit of an update on the applications received this week, and we'll highlight some communities that have utilized downtown transportation funds. So the goal of the Downtown Transportation Fund and the Community Revitalization Program is to preserve the character and enhance the future of medium and large-sized historic centers by incentivizing public and private investments, improving quality of life, and encouraging economic development. So on the screen, you'll see that we have 24 designated downtowns. So these are communities that have gone through the designation process all across the state, all different sizes and types of communities that have received designation and are now eligible for the Downtown Transportation Fund. And this, the number has changed at times, but now it's at 24 designated downtowns. Additionally, we have eligible designated village centers. So in 2021, we received one-time funding of $5 million that allowed us to expand eligibility to include village centers that had completed the Better Connections program. So the Better Connections program is a partnership between the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. It's led by V-Trans, and we also collaborate with the Department of Environmental Conservation. And that funding is aimed to provide technical assistance and funding to local communities to develop a master plan aimed at identifying their transportation, land use, and economic development goals. So once a community has completed the Better Connections program and has their master plan, they can then become eligible for the Downtown Transportation Fund. And we did have just a small correction. So on this slide, you'll see that we actually have 2 more designated village centers that will be eligible in 2026. They're finishing up the process of completing the Better Connections master plan now. So come 2026, they'll be eligible as well to apply for the Downtown Transportation Funds and put some of those wheels in motion. So the communities that have completed Better Connections are listed on the screen. And those are the village centers that are allowed to apply using those one-time funds. Additionally, Chittenden County communities are not eligible for Better Connections, but if they have completed a comparable planning process, they then become eligible. So these are the Chittenden County communities that have completed something comparable to Better Connections, eligible for a downtown transportation funds. So something to note when we talk about Downtown Transportation Fund and where the projects can happen. You can see on the screen that we have some example boundaries when applying for downtown transportation funds. The projects need to happen within the boundaries, or they need to serve the eligible village or the downtown. So all of the projects are typically contained close to or within the designated boundary. And we also wanted to hit on some of the common themes and common projects that we see. And we do have some photos coming up that kind of highlight some of these investments. But we're commonly seeing themes and applications coming in for bicycle and pedestrian enhancements. So think sidewalks and crosswalks, ADA modifications. So we might see handicap accessibility ramps added, streetscape improvements, parking facilities, rail and bus facilities, utility relocation, wayfinding signage, lighting improvements, and safety improvements. So sometimes an application might focus on one of these elements, or it might contain many. And oftentimes we see a lot of beautification included as well. And the Downtown Transportation Fund, the grant maximum is $200,000. When a community applies, they need to include 20% match, of which that can be in kind uses are allowable. Applications are typically due in February with funding decisions made in April. So this is good timing to be having this discussion because we did just get applications in this week. So decisions will be made in just a few months. And the timeline for the Downtown Transportation Fund is that when awarded, they'll have 24 months to start the project and then 36 months to complete it. And annually, when we think about the amount of money that's available, we receive just over $520,000 in an annual appropriation. And as we mentioned, there was one-time funding that came about in 2021 that expanded eligibility to include village centers. We wanted to give just a snapshot of the last couple of years so you can see some of the demand and about how many communities can be served. So you can see since 2022, 2023 and 2024, we've awarded above $1 million to between 8 and 15 communities. And then, as we just mentioned, 2025 applications just came in this week. So we have tallied them up and have received over $2 million in requests. And in this cycle, we saw an equal split between villages and downtowns. So 7 of each with a total of 14 applications. And I'll just leave this up for a moment so you can see the communities that did apply in 2025. So in the next few weeks, we'll be reviewing the applications for completeness, and decisions will be made in the coming months.
What's your budget for this year? Did the governor bump that up a little bit this year, didn't he?
We have,
Or-
it's not in the governor's budget this cycle, but we do have about, like I mentioned, about $520,000 in annual appropriations, some underspend from last cycle, and these past projects are still kind of closing out. So identifying that exact amount and about $500,000 in the one-time funding.
One time, yeah. For some reason, I thought that got increased this year, but it didn't. Okay, thanks.
But continuing to go ahead.
2 questions. One, I'll give them both at once. Where did the money originally come from? Question number 2, what's the, how do you evaluate these projects? And I assume some of the criteria is what other development grants the towns have gotten. So,
Yeah.
2 questions. Original pot of money?
For that history question.
Yeah, when you say originally, are you speaking of the one-time funding?
Yeah.
So that was out of 2 pots. It was out of the capital budget and out of the T-bill. And there was a split between the 2 for the one-time funding.
Okay.
Yeah. And the second part of the question.
And so that one-time funding is done in 2025.
Well, when we haven't awarded this round yet, so we're anticipating that money will be spent out this year.
And so are there discussions on next year, what money where it might come from?
We'll be back to the annual appropriation of a little over $520,000. And we'll need to drop the village centers from that as well, because that was tied to the one-time funding.
Okay, so it brought in those village centers. Okay, yes.
So without the funding, the village centers would have to drop.
And then my second question is, how do you evaluate, how are the grants, how are they evaluated?
Yeah, so Annually, we put out an application that identifies a lot of the metrics that they'll be scored against, asking about need, budget. We try to identify what the big goal is in the community and what the downtown transportation fund will contribute to that. And the decisions are made by the community investment board. So we bring the applications to them in April. Those decisions will be made. And then behind the scenes, we're doing lots of checks on completeness and checking that they have all of their application components. They've done their historic preservation review, but that criteria is outlined in the application, and then those decisions are made by the community investment board.
Thank you.
So if we look back at the last few years, again, this is just a bit of a snapshot, and you have this as a handout as well if you're interested in that. Since 2020, the Downtown Transportation Fund has awarded 47 projects in 30 communities, investing $5.9 million in downtown transportation funds, leveraging $4.7 million. And we always we like to highlight this community in the photos. It's Virgins. And this is an excellent example of a downtown transportation fund project that had many elements. We saw that they did sidewalk improvements, they added benches, there is accessibility modifications. So allowing it to be easier for community members to get to these businesses and continuing to go to businesses, easily navigate safely and with less impediments, and some beautification as well. So the next few slides, we just want to highlight some of the communities that have applied for the downtown transportation funds in the past. And many of these have received many cycles of funding and invested in different ways in different projects. So this is St. Albans. St. Albans has had projects since 2007. They've had some streetscaping projects, some lighting projects, sidewalks, a lot of projects focused on safety improvements and sidewalk improvements. In the town of Bristol, they focused on their village green. This space, well, one of their projects focused on this space, including new pathways, lightings. They've also had some sidewalk and lighting improvements around town. Brattleboro has had investments since the beginning of the funding, since 1999. They've had a number of projects focused on wayfinding signage, beautification, park improvements, investments to their transportation center. And then Pulteney has also received multiple rounds of funding. This is one of their most recent projects. They developed a new park that highlights the slate industry with some local slate. And this was completed in 2020. It was 2021's funding completed in 2022. And this project is Springfield COM2 Park. We like to highlight this one because it's an excellent example of the continuation of the Better Connections program. So Springfield had completed their Better Connections master plan and identified some projects that they wanted to complete, including the expansion of COM2 Falls Park, which was in an excellent location and had a lot of possibility for expansion close to businesses and coffee shops. So they applied for the downtown transportation funds in 2 cycles and combined 2 grants to complete this project. And they added, you can see the beautification that they've added benches, a concrete path, expanded the walkability of the site, and stabilized it as well. And then lastly, this is Rutland. This is an example of other wayfinding signage project. They also have done some lighting projects, streetscaping, crosswalks, but this is one of their more recent wayfinding signage projects. So those are just a few examples of some of the communities that have received funding. As we mentioned, there's been dozens, even in the last few years since 2020. All with the goal of supporting safe and vibrant downtowns and villages, trying to make them more walkable and bikeable, safe places and vibrant places to be. Thank you.
And so now, after this year, you're down to 2 projects, 3, a handful of projects at that point, or?
Yeah, so we will have the annual appropriation, which is about 520,000 with potentially any underspend. But it would be limited to those 24 downtowns. Again, villages would no longer be eligible. And we have seen an uptick in the demand in villages with even just the equal split of applications this cycle. But if the cap is kept at $200,000, yeah, it would be about two to three projects. And for instance, last cycle in 2024, we had 11 projects. And sometimes projects don't ask for the whole $200,000, so it does depend on what the project is and the budget. But it would be fewer projects to be funded.
Could I elaborate? So prior to the one-time funding, only designated downtowns were eligible. So when you saw the slide of the 24 communities, those were the communities that could apply for downtown transportation fund. Prior to having the one-time funding, we had a cap of $100,000 and it was a 50-50, not an 80-20. So when we had the additional funding, we included the villages because that expanded from 24 to about 40 communities eligible. We were able to expand it to $200,000, 80-20 match split, and then opened it up to the village center. So we'll be likely diverting back to that the way it was before the one-time funding, unless there's changes to the program.
And so how many applications did you get so far? 'Cause it's not quite the end of February, but
So the application deadline has passed, so that is the complete tally. So 7 villages and 7 downtowns, so 14 applications total.
and the max is 200.
200,000.
If you had, enough to do all 14, do you think you would have got a lot more applications? Do you think there's a reluctance to go through the process because really only 3 are going to get something? Do you think that that's, holding back more applications, more demand?
It's the program's been competitive every year, with the exception of a couple of years that we had the one-time funding. It's been competitive, and we've had to fund about half to 2/3 of the projects and turn away about 1/3 to half the project. So we would still get about 12 to 15, 10 to 15 applications a year from the pool of applicants, but not be able to fund all of them.
Is that a question or not?
It is a question, but I'm,
No, go right ahead, please.
okay, so I'm just asking specific to my district, so, I saw that Waitsfield and Warren and Moortown all came up in your slides, and I don't know whether they are downtowns or villages.
Villages.
They're all
They're all
villages,
village centers.
okay, so basically. Moortown's on the list as having applied this year, but after this year. Only the downtowns will be allowed to apply, okay.
Yeah.
And Waitsfield and Warren. Have they applied in the past, or they,
Yes.
Waitsfield, I know, yeah, Waitsfield and one, yes.
Yeah.
Gary has a lot more historical knowledge than I do of. But yes, they have, and we also did give some handouts, which has the history of the whole program since 1999. By town, so you'll see it's organized alphabetically by town. If you're interested in looking at specific investments in each community.
thank you.
Yeah, they had, those communities had completed a Better Connections plan, part of the Mad River Valley.
District, like Josh Schwartz.
Josh Schwartz
Yeah.
led that effort, a consultant, and kind of looked at kind of transportation connections all in the Mad River Valley there, which helped provide recommendation for different types of projects, which then led them to for downtown transportation.
I know there's a big proposed transportation corridor, like bike path, basically going from Waitsfield straight up to, I think, right up through Moortown and Middlesex.
Yep.
Which is in the planning phase. Would that have been something that they could have applied to this program for funding for?
So again, if we think about the designated boundary, there has to be investment within that within the boundaries, so there might be, if there's an element that is contained in that location, it might have been included in.
We're serving, so sometimes we have a connection that's missing from like a neighborhood into the village, for example, and maybe that's along that path. We could fund that connection, like just outside of the boundary if it's directly serving.
Okay,
But you know, we would have to take case by case basis, look at what does that mean directly serving,
okay.
you know, in the context of a long path connecting multiple communities.
So the capital budget and the transportation budget took some probably significant ARPA money and whatnot and directed it into this program, and now it's gone. Is there anybody?
This was non-ARPA, but because of the ARPA funding and allowed some funding to be freed up.
And you're not aware of any current plans of anybody pushing to request or ask for any substantial return to that level of any of those fundings?
I'm not aware of that at this moment.
It's sort of a report of what we've accomplished, and now it'll be, okay. That's just what I want to make sure there isn't an ask on the table and whatnot. Representative Ron?
Yeah, how much are you guys working with AOT on Vermont state standards? So they coordinate as much as possible with with the improvements that are allowed in downtown, designated downtowns, but honestly, more importantly, in villages, because villages really need to not be limited to these very gold-plated, incredibly expensive approaches to just get a sidewalk in or just get a crosswalk in. So are you guys involved with, are we looking comprehensively at this? I mean, this is such a focus of our, all of the housing reform that we passed last year, for example, all the land use reform. I mean, is this a coordinated approach among agencies? It's hard for us to understand that. And are tax incentives being used through the dessegration program, which is maybe not exactly what you guys work on, but I'm trying to get a sense of, we now know that we want to focus housing, economic development, and all kinds of opportunities in our villages and downtowns, our historic urban infrastructure, that whole entire network. Like, how are we, what is the plan for doing that? This feels very much like the car paradigm just continues to reign supreme, and we're just nibbling around at the edges. And what can we do as now that we have this vision to help you guys, make this widely available? This seems unbelievably short-sighted to me that we are not investing in our villages, for example. And I'll stop at that.
It's like, where do I begin?
I know.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, there is.
But from a coordination standpoint, very much so, this program has been a partnership with V-Trans since the beginning, right? So we work closely with them. They're part of the review process of the applications that come in. We provide a lot of resources to communities to point them to, the standards that are necessary as they're considering the sidewalk. So when it comes to, the collaboration, very much so, we want to partner with the town, with V-Trans and our agency of commerce on that part. From an investment standpoint, and like how to, we're looking at adding housing, and we're looking at, making things, more pedestrian friendly or bike friendly. I mean, I think looking at a holistic approach is important, and that's why having these types of better connections planning processes allows the village center to go through a thoughtful process in terms of determining what the priorities are for investments. And they're not just looking at vehicular transportation, right? They're looking at, how is it, intersections that need to be safer to cross, where housing, developments may be being planned for. So it's not just the existing built, it's also thinking forward.
So I know we codified better connections last last biennium. My understanding is it's we can't, another thing where we can't meet the demand. There's only 2 a year or something like that, right? So 3 a year. So I guess I'm looking at what are the opportunities to kind of get more folks in the queue here? We're hearing all the time about capacity problems, and it seems like we make this, we say we want this, but we make it extremely challenging to actually, get to be part of, team opportunity in Vermont, I guess. So, that would be very helpful for us to know what are the policy initiatives that we could be helping, to coordinate, with transportation and with you guys, what are just getting us that feedback against the background that there's all this uncertainty at the federal level, which of course makes everything harder. But, we really do want to, work collaboratively and helpfully on these things.
I mean, we like to think of ourselves as being very accessible to communities. Our division of community planning and revitalization, are in the field a lot and talking to communities. So, providing that kind of level of support, in terms of listening to where the town's needs are, and kind of helping support them in the direction of, in lieu of their capacity, trying to provide them as many resources and other partners that we work with that may have funding. This is a small pot of money they're going to need to apply to V-Trans maybe for additional funding, or maybe they need to apply for a conservation grant, or a Brownsfield grant to kind of make the entire project happen. And so we try to fill some of that capacity. I mean, I think the regional planning commissions try to fill some of that capacity, but to your point, is that enough? No, we're recognizing that that's not enough. And we are, our department, partnership with UVM is kind of taking a look at some of that capacity, of technical assistance capacity at municipal level. And we're in partnership with a number of partners from the Preservation Trust of Vermont, the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, and various other partners that are going to help support this kind of surveying and analysis of like, what is the system looking like in terms of how we best support these communities? What are we doing right? What's going well? Where are the gaps? How can we better address those needs, to kind of get exactly what you're speaking to. So that is going to be a year-long process that we're just kicking off now, and more to come this year. And we encourage you. We did a short presentation to the Rural Caucus last week on this, and we'll be inviting you all in your communities to kind of participate and put input into that. So that feeds into kind of the transportation conversation as well.
That's great. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now, Gary, thank you very much for coming in to report on your piece, and then I guess it'll be a shorter review for next year and a little less, but wish you luck with that piece. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
having us. It was good.